Good morning and welcome to today's program. This event is brought to you by the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition and Bid Design. First, I want to confirm that everyone can hear us okay and see the screen. Just type yes in the question field if you're all set. Perfect. Thank you so much. Please feel free to use this same question field to ask a question at any time during the program. Just type the question in the webinar dashboard and we'll share it with our speakers today. A recording of this presentation will be available after the event. You can also receive a copy of today's slide deck by contacting Ashley Coronado with Bid Design, and her contact information will be available during the presentation today. We are very pleased to have two speakers joining us here today. Brent Paris, founder and CEO of Bid Design, and Sandy Albee, Chief Operating and Compliance Officer with Bid Design. Bid Design is making a big commitment to supporting Pacific Northwest companies in winning more government contracts. Sandy and Brent are active in the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition as Platinum Sustaining members. Thank you very much. And are hosting this series of webinars to share their extensive experience in helping businesses to produce high quality, compliant, and winning proposals. So thank you again for your support. Brent, Sandy, I'll let you begin the presentation.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
This is Brent, and we're going to give you guys a lot of proposal information today. We're going to probably give you more than you anticipated, and it's luckily there's a rewind function, I think. When we're done, you can go back and grab some things. But our approach is to give you the full gold mine of information that we have assessed over 21 years now of great proposal experience and tips and tricks. And this is designed for anyone that has either been a part of a proposal in the past or is planning to in response to federal RFPs. So some of this stuff may be familiar, you may know pieces of it, but we're sure that you'll probably grab some great new information from it as we go along. So if any of this is a little bit starts at the elementary level for you, if you've done this before, it's okay. Just be patient and we'll get there. So with that, we do want to give you a quick overview of who we are and pictures of us. And unfortunately, there's one of me, but fortunately, there's one of Sandy as well. I did found Bid Designs in 2006. My entire career has been actually in government RFPs. We've become a full proposal support firm in the last 12, 13 years. Sandy is our magnificent president, COO, and chief compliance officer, and you won't find anyone that's more knowledgeable of compliance in the federal RFP realm. And just a little bit of a slide here, and we'll get over this really quickly, just kind of talks a little bit about who we are and what we do, but we won't spend a heck of a lot of time on that today. But really, we focus on helping our clients bid more RFPs, spend less on it, and really focus our services on compliance. With that, we have, again, a wealth of information just in our heads and our processes and our procedures that we're going to share today with you in training. And we'll just go ahead and get started in that. And this is our favorite starting slide every time we do training because it really, I think, resounds with a lot of people. There's some humor built in it. I can't hear voices, but feel free to laugh. But this is the typical RFP process that a lot of companies go through and struggle with. And as you can see, a lot of things can happen, and we hear it all the time. It's just really difficult to get your arms around it if you don't do it every day. If you're new to it, there's so many terms. Where do you start? A lot of things can plague the proposal process negatively. So a lot of times people just get excited, I guess, when an RFP comes out, and they'll start working on it and start figuring out where the gaps are, and they'll start talking about commas and periods because that's compliant. They'll actually start working on it, and then somewhere in the middle of working on it, they realize they may not have everything they need. They might make a bid decision in the middle of it. They'll start their reviews. They'll understand that they don't have exactly what they need. They'll re-review their bid position and maybe decide that they shouldn't bid it, but then they decide that they've spent time on it, so they don't want to give up the resources they put into it. They'll develop the solution towards the end, and finally, in the last few days of the proposal, do what they call all-nighters and stay up all night and rewrite the entire thing. So the last 30 days were, for nothing, basically. Everyone gets stressed and frustrated, and then they finally submit the proposal, take a few days off to recover, then they go back and try to figure out how much it costs, and then they schedule a lessons learned meeting to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And we see this time and time again. In fact, we've had clients come in and say, that's exactly how we do processes and procedures, and that's what we don't need to do, and that's right. And there's a lot of reasons this happens. And one of the reasons, which is what we're going to focus on today, and it's really what Bid Design's focuses on, is that separation of what needs to happen in a proposal. So we call the key services proposal infrastructure services, and those are everything on the outside of the box. Those are things that should be done every single time, and it always starts with a compliance matrix, shredding the RFP from the government, determining what goes in your proposal, developing your outlines, processing amendments, questions and answers, doing all the production. And people say, well, I know how to use Word, but you know what? They don't know how to interpret an RFP. So there's compliance-based and even getting a professional-looking document. Then you have the concern of, does the document look good? Because you're turning it in and it represents your company. It needs to be a top-notch marketing document. Basically you're going to have some reviews. If you're working with team members, you're going to have more formalized reviews. Then you're going to do all the production, all the creativity that goes along with it. So those things have to be done every single time, and it takes a lot of work to do those things. But the problem is people can focus on those infrastructure elements so much that they may not focus as much in the middle as they should, and that is actually developing your solution, developing what goes into your proposal, how your products or services are going to be presented and tailored and priced, how they're going to meet customer needs, how they're going to ensure that you're beating your competitors, writing where writing is required, tying pricing to your solution. All of those things is where your expertise, your company, your team need to be focused every time. So we like to separate this out in the minds, because that's one of the first key parts to really what we call attacking this proposal, is separating out how we should be handling it and looking at different things. So that's just kind of a starting point in some of the things that we're going to cover. Now, this section, we're really just going to talk about the key fundamentals of the federal acquisition strategy. I'm going to let Sandy kind of speak to this. Again, she's the expert in this. And this is really helpful if you're going after your first RFP. It's really helpful if you've only been through a couple, and it's a good reminder if you've been through a few. So Sandy, kind of talk us through the good, the bad, and just how this federal acquisition thing is set up, and what people need to know as they go forward and work on proposals.
Sure, happy to do that, Brent, and welcome to everyone that's listening in on the webinar, and thank you, PNDC, for hosting us this morning. Bad news, good news is what we're calling this slide, and some people get scared, for lack of a better term, of the way that RFPs are structured, because if you're like most businesses that are in the government contracting realm, you have more than one customer, and sometimes those customers provide RFPs in many different formats, and there are many different requirements. There are so many rules and regulations, and it's easy to get overwhelmed with them looking at the RFP documents themselves, not to mention all the subject matter expertise that you have to go into it, layer in pricing questions, as well as making sure that you have folks to actually perform the work. That can definitely be overwhelming when it comes to an RFP when it lands on your desk. There are a lot of opinions in terms of the best way to develop a proposal. Here at Bid Designs, we have a methodology that we use and that we recommend in terms of outlining a compliant proposal. That said, we don't have the crystal ball, and if we knew the perfect way to set up a response every time, everyone would win every single time they turned in a proposal. Now, of course, that is not the case, and so there's different ways, and knowing your customer is actually really critical to having that nuanced idea of how it is that you're going to structure that proposal. However, keep in mind that you have to be compliant no matter how you're going to structure that or set that up. The good parts is that you do have the basic essentials of response preparation. We'll go ahead and tell you those today. If you have never had the opportunity to have proposal training, just straight government RFP proposal training, this series is really going to help you. And for those of you that are familiar with it and have done this for 20 years plus, like Brent and I have, we're hopefully going to give you some tips and tricks, because we're working all proposals every day as our sole focus here at Bid Designs. The federal acquisition process is actually a very logical set of procedures. Sometimes RFPs are written in a way that it doesn't seem like they always follow those procedures. However, if you're working on a federal proposal, rules might be different for state, local, federal, or an international proposal. And in that case, you've got to narrow down a set of questions to be able to clarify the requirements. But for federal, United States federal proposals in particular, they actually are a very logical set of procedures. And once you have a basic understanding of those, you can understand what all has to be submitted with your RFP. Of course, understanding the scope of work and knowing your customer, those are all things that go in. And those are things that those of you that are in business, I'm going to guess that you have a good understanding of who your customers are, as well as a good understanding of a new customer base that you would like to expand your services and your offerings to. This here is some information that we pulled from the Congressional Research Services. I'm not going to read it to you out loud, but those of you that are interested in having the slides, if you'll contact Ashley Coronado following this presentation, she'd be happy to forward them to you. And this is a good overview explaining the federal procurement process. Of course, referencing the FAR and the requirements to have a DUNS number and be registered in SAM, all that good stuff that goes into making sure that you're able to submit a federal proposal. This is just the second half of that information. Now we'll get into some typical acquisition milestones. The RFP drop itself is usually not your first inclination that there is going to be an RFP for the work it is that you're looking to provide the federal government. Normally, there's market research that the government is required to conduct. They usually put out an RFI or a sources sought, or they'll put out an industry day or ask for industry one-on-one sessions. Those of you with small businesses should make sure that you know the small business advocates and the small business representatives at the agencies that you're wishing to do work with. Once the government finishes that initial market research and conducts their industry day, it can be either or both, depending on the size of the procurement. The government usually likes to put out a draft RFP so that industry can review it, ask any questions that they might have, and make sure that they have a good understanding of their requirements, and make sure that industry has a good understanding of the requirements so that they can clear up any major errors or omissions before they release the final. Then they release the final RFP, and that's when the clock starts. At that point, you need to know when your proposal is due. Set yourself a schedule so that you're able to conduct all of the different elements of proposal response by the time the proposal is due. Once the proposal gets turned in, it goes into what the government calls source selection. Those can take a few different takes depending on what size the procurement is. Then from there, the government will ask for final proposal revisions. They may issue evaluation notices. They may issue what they call discussion notices. The government contracting officers have a great amount of leeway in how they want to interact with industry once your proposal is turned in. And all of the instruction regarding how that will be handled post-submission of your proposal will be written right into the RFP itself. If it's not, you'll want to ask that question and make sure that you understand what's going to happen with your proposal in terms of how it will be evaluated and how interaction with offerers will take place once your RFP is submitted. Once we go through that process, then we get into contract award, and hopefully you get it signed and start performing and do well and continue to expand your business.
And Sandy, can you touch a little bit more on the market research phase? And, we get a lot of people that ask us, should they do an RFI? Is something going to be awarded from it? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, so absolutely, Brent. So market research has to take place. It's a requirement per the FAR for the contracting offices to conduct market research before they put out an RFP. That market research is intended to, one, understand who out there in industry is available to provide that service. And further, they're required to see if small businesses are able to provide that services or that particular good or service. They're also required to narrow down and see, is this something that we can do as a set-aside for an 8A firm or a woman-owned small business or a veteran-disabled small business. Any of those different areas, the government may be able to do set-asides and also ensure, again, that there are companies out there that are able to provide that good or service. If you have the opportunity to respond to a sources sought or an RFI, we always recommend that you take that opportunity because that is a great way for the contracting officer and the customer to get to know you if they don't know you already. Section here from the FAR, this is the Uniform Contract Format. If you haven't seen this before, you can go ahead and search that FAR Clause 15.204-1, and it'll give you the outline of all of the sections that will be in your RFP, and that RFP will ultimately become your contract once it's awarded to you. So the different sections, and these may be labeled slightly differently depending on the procurement, and it will also look a little bit different if it's a commercial buy as opposed to a negotiated procurement from FAR Part 15. So in there you'll see an SF-33, which is just the solicitation and the contract document itself. Section A is general information in regards to the procurement. Section B is where you're going to find the CLINs, which will set up how the contract is funded. Section C will be your statement of work, or PWS, or performance work statement. Packaging and marking, inspection and acceptance, and deliveries or performance are more critical for supplies contractors. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of water there. Section G is contract administrative data, where your information regarding funding will appear. Section H you want to pay close attention to because there may be additional procurement requirements in there. Section I and K contain FAR clause requirements that you'll need to respond to within your submission. Section J is attachments and exhibits, where you really need to pay close attention there to see if there's additional requirements. Usually the procedurals or the deliverables requirements will be listed in Section J. Any additional, bidders library information will be in there, drawings, specs, maps, things like that, that you'll definitely need to take a look at. And then, of course, Sections L and M, which are the critical sections when you're responding to an RFP. Section L is instructions to offerers, and Section M is the evaluation criteria.
And, the thing that we like to focus on here, and as Sandy said, different acquisition types are going to follow. Maybe it won't be labeled this way and things like that. So this is pretty much the key standard, I guess, if you will. But the thing that's important here is to realize that no matter what RFP you're looking at, it is probably going to be your contract if it's awarded. So the key thing here on this slide is everything in green are things that you need to consider in terms of your contracts people, the terms and conditions that you're going to be held to. And we've highlighted in red those things that you need specifically for developing your proposal. And I know the first proposal I did 21 years ago, it just wasn't clear to me. I didn't have that kind of training or understanding, so I looked at a big, huge RFP, and I had no idea why all those sections and all those words were there. So we really like to kind of focus this as a foundational point of training, in that, you've really always got to look for, number one, when you're doing your proposal, what those instructions and evaluation criteria are. Without the evaluation criteria, you don't really know what you're writing. That's your scoring. That's how you're going to be evaluated, and you always need to focus on that first. Of course, you need to focus on the scope of work or the performance standards of the products that you're going to deliver, and you also need to focus on how you're going to be held to contract terms. Those are also key, but you got to think in terms of performance requirements versus submittal requirements for the proposal. So this is a really good, again, foundational document for some of the things that we're going to talk about. Now, there's different ways, there's different methods, there's different ideas, opinions on how to attack a proposal, and we'll use that word attack throughout this because it really is something that you've got to get your arms around and do well. Keeping in mind, your objective is one thing: for the evaluators to assign you the highest scores, the lowest risk, and award you the contract. In order to get there, there's a lot of things that go into that. We recommend, number one, to me, it really starts in the very beginning of even making the right bid decision, we call it. That means that you've got a pipeline of upcoming work and opportunities that you're going to focus after, and hopefully ahead of time do some research and figuring out what it is that you're going to put into these things. Always think in terms of a solution. When you build your solution, that is exactly what it is. It's what you're offering. Now, you've got to put in the proposal in terms of the way they've asked for it and the instructions, evaluation criteria. But in your solution, you need to tie it to what that customer's buying, what your competitive position is, who you're competing against, how you're going to provide lower risk and higher value. And you're going to work on your own strengths and weaknesses. We love to recommend workshops where you identify where someone else may know your weaknesses and try to outbid you. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into these things. And, if you've got 20 or 30 days to do it, that's really not a great amount of time to really build a solid solution. So anytime you can build a solution ahead of the final RFP release, you're much better off, obviously.
That's right, Brent, and I think that we always need to make sure that we're doing this at the corporate company level, where you're talking about your pipeline and the strategic solutions that you're offering as a company, so that you can pull from that when you get to the proposal stage. So that way you can have your broad solution that your company offers, and then you need to apply that specifically to the requirements of the RFP that you're going after.
That's right. The third element is we recommend that you manage every proposal as you would a project, any project. That is with a schedule, with roles and responsibilities, configuration control, scheduled reviews, status calls, you name it. And the reason is that keeps that noise level down, so that you're not, if you even have 2 or 3 people working on it, you're immediately going to be faced with, what are we doing? Who's got the document? All this kind of stuff. But it really increases the larger you are and the larger number of team members you have working on your proposal. You've got to manage it as a project with a really solid person that knows how to coordinate and make sure that you're, administratively keeping up with all the things that need to happen. That saves you a heck of a lot of time and worry. And I always say, if you've got the executives and you're working a proposal with several people and they're worried about configuration control and things like that, the people that should really be building the solution, that's a good sign that something's not going quite right. Everything that you're doing has to be written with compliance. We hear all the time, well, I don't like the order they've asked me to put this in. And our answer is, well, that's really too bad. The order that they're going to score it in their evaluation criteria and the way that they've asked for it is the way that you need to provide it. If you do not put it in the way that they've asked for it in terms of compliance and evaluation, you're really putting yourself at risk, meaning you've got evaluators sitting there looking at a checklist and score sheet. They want to see the information they got to score, and they don't want to have to look for it. So if you do it in any other way, you're really putting unnecessary risk, and the resources that you're putting into it can really be put at risk. And finally, the other main component of a proposal is to publish it, and that is a true marketing document effort. That's where it's the highest quality possible. It's 100% compliant. It's written, in a one voice term, so it doesn't look like 10 pieces of different people putting material in, and that it's written and presented with evaluator ease. So it's like any marketing document. You don't typically see marketing documents that aren't well done or misspelled words and things like that. And we can't overemphasize the importance of making a really solid presentation. As soon as the evaluators open it, they're going to judge your company based on even how it looks. And they're not going to say that, but they're just people. They're going to look at it the same way you would. And when you consider that it's going to be stacked against others, you've got a really compelling, customer-focused, high-quality binder and cover and things like that, and everything's formatted well, and you've got professional tabs, and you name it, it's just going to strike a chord better than something that looks like it was hurried and put together and, stuck out and hope for the best. It really does make a difference, and we really advocate for that.
Yeah, and when we're talking about publishing, we're not only talking about printed proposals that have to be
right.
paper and binders. We're also talking about publishing, desktop publishing, electronic upload. Those documents really have to be easy to read. The government has to be able to easily find the files that they're looking for that you've either uploaded or submitted on a CD. Publishing encompasses the way in which you present your proposal to your government customer, whatever that method might be.
One of the, obviously we see a lot of companies and a lot of needs. One of the things that we get are phone calls of someone that an RFP just came out and they need someone to help write it. Well, number one, we don't do that. There's a reason for that. We don't know your work. We don't know everybody's work. But there's a bigger reason for that, is we don't really know what writing means when someone asks for it. So if you think about it, this building block is your solution as it turns into writing. Writing is the result of identifying what it is the customer needs. It's the result of having the right solution to beat your competitors. It's the result of making sure that you're maximizing your strengths and mitigating your own weaknesses. It's putting your solution together in terms of features and benefits so that you can sell it. And it's really building that entire offering that you're going to provide the government within those confines. And once you do that, the writing should be pretty easy because you've got the components and you've got the compliance matrix and you know what the government's asking for. But if you just have an RFP and you jump to number 5, it's going to be very difficult for you to put together a comprehensive winning document.
That's right.
So that's the kind of thing that we coach our clients on is, and in our training is, please don't think in terms of, I just got to write it. You've got to do a lot more than that. Now, that sounds kind of scary, I guess, but the truth is if you can get good at doing that, you're going to have better proposals. You're going to have a higher win rate because you've taken the time that it takes to really analyze these customers, get to know them, who you're competing against, and how you're going to put together a winning solution. And you're going to focus, you and your team, on how do we get the highest evaluation scores? How do we get the highest points? Because they're going to tell you how they're going to evaluate it. And if you're ever writing a proposal that doesn't have evaluation criteria, I would stop and call the police because something's wrong. You have got to have evaluation criteria.
Maybe the contracting officer.
Maybe the contracting officer. Call someone. But don't ever write it without knowing how they're going to evaluate it. And this one just kind of takes into a little bit, this is kind of stuff you can study a little bit later. And this gets a little bit more into some other sessions that we'll do, which we'll present in a moment of the upcoming sessions. But always think in terms of what the customer's buying, who you're competing against, and what it is that you're all about and what you're offering. That all should be assessed and put together before you start what we call writing. Per the topics, we're going to give you some key, I guess we call it pitfalls in proposals, kind of bouncing off the things that we've talked about so far. These are things we see all the time. We're going to tell you why they happen and what the result of those things are. And then a little bit later here, we're going to show you some really good success tips to prevent these types of things. One of the first things that we see, and this is especially true in smaller companies that aren't so accustomed to writing to government RFPs, is they'll start and then they'll stop. And that's frustrating. And it's frustrating because they spent time, they spent money. No one has time to do a proposal. I don't care who you are, what company you're with, what size you're with. They never come out at the right time. You're probably not equipped to just have a full-up proposal team to focus on it. yet you need to bid on them so that you can grow, and you need to understand that you're not going to win them all. And, that's the trick. I came from a company in my background whose sole theory was bid 3 proposals, win 1 of them. You kind of got to look at it that way. I mean, if you're only focusing on 1 proposal in 2 years from the federal government, I mean, you're putting a lot of eggs in that. But I think what happens is these false starts on proposals, they can really bring down that desire to do it. This doesn't look right. We just found out we couldn't do it. A lot of times this happens because it really starts in the beginning, is even deciding to bid on it. That process was missing, or it really wasn't that good. And that's different for each company, but determining should we bid on this in the first place is a really, really good starting point. And even if you get good at it, to come up with some scoring mechanisms to determine, consistently how you as a company decide to bid on RFPs. A lot of times it can just, quite frankly, catch you by surprise, and you don't have the right people with the right knowledge of how to even dissect an RFP and put it together. A lack of understanding of the requirements. You can, again, if you just dive right into that writing and, finally someone starts writing and they realize, well, we don't have this, we don't have that. Those are those assessment and shredding things that weren't considered up front. And then sometimes people feel like, well, I don't know that something's been revealed and we don't think that we're going to beat this company and things like that. And that, doing that competitive assessment in the middle of it is a little bit difficult to overcome and things like that. The problem is when you start and stop proposals and decide not to bid on them, you're definitely wasting resources. You're going to create some burnout for yourself and for others. If you've teamed with other companies and said, hey, I'd like you to be my subcontractor or team member, and then you call it off in the middle, you're going to have some reputation risk to them. And people talk, they'll find out about things like that, and they won't be as interested in helping you in the first place the next time. So those are things that we see in terms of starting on proposals and then stopping in the middle, and you definitely want to have strategies and things in place to avoid that. Another pitfall is the lack of customer understanding and knowledge, and why that happens is, if you're building a solution and you're trying to say this is exactly what you need and why you need it, and why you need our product or our service, that's because if you're not able to answer those questions, you really haven't talked with that customer in the past. You don't know who they are. The opportunity is identified way too late to really understand that, and it may not be considered a core company practice. That opens up the question, should you bid on something where you've never known the customer before? Well, there's different schools of thought on that. I don't believe that you shouldn't, but I think that you should have an understanding of what that customer group needs. Why is that customer buying what they're buying? And I think even if you don't know the people or know the players, you should be able, because you're the expert in this field, be able to tell them exactly what it is they need and why, and how they should be buying it from you. And if you do that well, you can actually go some competitors. So there's an understanding that you want to establish in the minds of the evaluators that you get it and you get what is so important to them. Now, when you take that to an advanced level, yes, it's very good if way ahead of time you can contact some of the key people and go out and meet them and understand what they're looking for. But there's ways to do that as well. And another key pitfall is a lack of effective win themes and strategies that sell. So we talk about, if the term win theme is new to you, it's those things that pop out in the proposal that you want to really grab the attention of the evaluators. But sometimes, people can use very generic themes and unsubstantiated themes. And I guess our favorite one not to use is just a big, bold statement of we are the low-risk provider. Well, you got to prove that, and you got to explain what that means. You've got to have win themes that resound with the evaluators. You want strategies that show up that are going to increase your profile and really mitigate your competitors. And you're going to answer the question, why choose us, every time that you have what we call win themes and strategies that are going to appear throughout your proposal. So those are some, just some top level, I guess, solution type pitfalls that we see. One of the things that can really bring down a proposal. So that's that's kind of the core level that we just talked about, is that solution set, understanding the customer. But then when you get into it, actually putting it together, even if you have those things, ineffective resource management can really hinder you, and actually you can wind up spending a lot more than you should, for sure, at best. But you got to keep in mind, when you do a proposal like this, there's a lot of different skill sets required, and sometimes you have a technical expert that knows what that product or solution should look like, but they're not typically writers. And you're probably not going to try to make them writers. But getting their brain out into developing that solution, in terms of always thinking a solution is the right approach. You very few people can do it all. Very few people can shred an RFP, build a solution, write it, put together the strategies and themes, and do all the publishing in a compliant manner. And very few people are a part of a solution team, and that begs the question: I don't even have a solution team. So I want you to, through this training, think in terms of, I can't really bid on an RFP if I don't have a solution, if I don't have something that I'm selling. Maybe you know it, but you still got to, present that in the mindset of the buyer, in terms of making sure that it is what they're looking for and that you can sell it. Compliance issues, Sandy?
Sure. So there's some schools of thought that believe that you have to reply to every shall statement in a PWS or whatever that equivalent document might be. Our recommended approach is to really review the evaluation factors and the instructions to offerers, and see where that PWS or where that statement of work instruction really fits in to how the proposal is going to be evaluated. If you miss that, or if you miss other sections in Section L because you were so busy focusing on your technical solution, it's entirely possible that your proposal may not be reviewed at all and thrown out for being non-compliant. Another one here is the meeting schedule, or slipping into ridiculous hours. If you don't have a plan of attack in place in terms of how are you going to get the proposal turned in on time, you can really enter into a negative downward spiral in regards to crazy working hours right before the proposal's due that will result in a proposal, but it probably isn't going to result in a proposal that you're proud of, that best represents your customer. So you do want to make sure that you have a structured approach to responding to proposals, and you also want to make sure that you have your team stick around for the next one. That's something that executives think a lot about, is who is going within my team to work on this proposal, and if I have them here 80 hours a week, will they stick around for the next one?
And I think one of the takeaways here, if we had a bell, we'd ding it at this time, but the compliance issues and forgetting or not even knowing that we need to focus on sections L and M, or the equivalent, which is the instructions and evaluation criteria. We literally see people all the time that come to us that haven't done this, and we had one question not long ago, and they said, please look at this RFP. Someone told me that they're going to evaluate this by section M instead of the PWS, and we took the time to explain that, that's how it works. You need to put in there exactly what they're going to be evaluating. They're going to tell you. It's like giving you the answers to the test ahead of time. So those are some really important foundational elements. When you get into doing proposals, and again, if you've done this for a while, you've done this. If you haven't done it, you're going to be moving in this direction. But you can do reviews, and they call them color team reviews. People use the terms pink team, red team, gold team. They all mean different things to different companies. But a lot of times a review can bring down the proposal process, and there's a few reasons for that. You can have reviewers that are just filling out whatever they think. They're going to throw out stuff and never to be heard from or seen again, and people are going to be having comments that don't really make sense in terms of their solution, get frustrated, and really not know what to do with it. But review teams need to be led. They need to be well positioned, and people on the review teams need to be giving something to look at. I think anytime you just bring people together and say, hey, give me your feedback, you're going to get a lot of stuff and not know exactly how to deal with it. When you work with subcontractors or team members, this is very common. A lot of times there's a lot of delays on getting the information back, and that occurs on both sides. If you're the prime contractor, if you can clarify for them, even in your teaming agreement, that you're going to have one POC, you're going to have scheduled, non-repetitive issuances of data that you might need from them, organized in other words, you're going to get by a lot better than quickly sending them something to respond to. So that can be the blame of the prime side. It can also be the blame of the subcontractor side, and that is that you don't have one person assigned and you're taking it seriously, but you may not have, put one person in charge of it and had a real dedicated approach to making sure that you're going to get them the information. So it's a dual street that's necessary in terms of having a schedule, expectations, and key point of contacts. One of the biggest pitfalls, I think, that really makes people not ever want to do this again, and I can tell you, I've never done this in my career. I've never spent all night finishing a proposal, spent the night at work to do it, but we know a lot of people have. That's the result of a lot of things going wrong. There's no other way to say it. If that's happening, there's been some problems, and that can be prevented. I think one of the things is the magnitude of production is underestimated at times, because you can get down to the final elements, especially if it's a printed proposal. We've heard horror stories of people not being able to get things printed and put together, and even the CDs burned or things like that. People want to keep writing, want to keep putting things on it. There's just a lot that goes into that. Or, like we said earlier, we get towards the end and someone realizes we don't even have the right solution, so they're rewriting it. A lot of that is just good project management, understanding how to put these things into place, and really avoiding that. That happens just a good bit of the time. Some other things that we see, these are good foundational things to keep in mind in terms of putting a proposal together. Some basic production type things. One of the things that we always tell people is don't underestimate the value of a really good graphic, but don't put a graphic in that doesn't mean anything. If you just have a visual and it causes confusion for an evaluator, I'd take it out. Not using proposal voicing or effective one voicing, as we call it, making it sounds like a lot of different people wrote the proposal. You want it to avoid that and make sure that there's a consistency of presentation of message. That's easily done if you can kind of get all the inputs and have one person dedicated to putting the right voice on it. It really does make a difference as it's being evaluated. Proposal errors, we see that all the time. Not in proposals we support, but we see it in ones of clients that come to us that have had problems in the past, and we'll actually sometimes assess what they've put in. And when you've got inconsistencies of, saying in one section we're going to do this, or in one section we have experience here, but it's not really tying to the next section, the document was not edited because there just wasn't any time, there's misspellings, punctuation, things like that. There's a lot of things that can go wrong just in trying to produce a quality document. And I think a lot of those are just driven by the fact that there's a lack of time. If you had 6 months to do this, some people would still be last minute. But the one thing that you always have is a time crunch in terms of when this thing is due. So, really budgeting your time and understanding what it is that you've got to do is a key element in getting these things done. We talked about kind of in terms of presenting the pitfalls, but here we're going to talk about what the best practices are. And this is kind of a summary and kind of the back door of the things that we just presented. And we want to leave you with the best practices, not so much the concerns, but we want you to avoid these common pitfalls because they are common. They're common across anyone, any company, any type offering that we see all the time. But in terms of false starts on proposals, just don't allow it to happen. Make sure that you've got a really good bid decision, gate review process, whatever that may be, and that you've got a really good method for assessing the RFP, building a solution, and having all your ducks in a row before you start it. So if you're getting in the middle of proposals routinely, you need to stop, check this slide, and really work on that. Ensuring that you have a good understanding of the customer and what they're buying is critical. That can happen in two different ways. Number one, by actually visiting with the customer if there's time. Number two, by being that expert in that area. So you're giving them more of an academic understanding because you're the expert in what it is you're selling. You can tell them what it is they need to be buying. You can tell them why they should select yours because it's the better value for them. Sometimes you might want to use consultants. That would not be bid designs in that case, but you might find a really good subject matter expert that happens to know a customer. They exist, they're everywhere, On those bigger procurements, it's probably good to, entertain that if you need that kind of help that can really help you understand the customer, where they can really sit in a room with you. And I've seen some great ones. I've seen some not so great ones. So you got to pick those well. But to be able to tell you, I know this customer, this is what they're looking for. Here's some problems they've had in the past. Here's some problems they've had with other contractors. So what do? You're going to go in there and say, hey, we understand these are the kind of issues you're facing, and we're going to help you make sure that doesn't happen anymore. Win themes and strategies that really sell and position your offering are really key. A lot of times we recommend our clients just spend 2 or 3 hours in one room together just brainstorming their solution and how they're going to sell this, and do it across the evaluation criteria in the section M, or the evaluation criteria, your RFP. Really, you want to just take those and go, okay, how are we going to maximize the scores? What are we going to do? What are we going to put in this proposal? That's a lot different. That's a bigger difference in approach than just looking at it and go, how do we write it?
And Brent, at what stage within the proposal should they do that 2-3 hour set aside to really go through the win themes and strategies?
You should do it in the beginning or before the beginning. You don't want to do it in the middle. You don't want to do it in the end. But it should be the foundation. This is a foundations class, but that's a key foundation of knowing what you're selling and how you're going to maximize those points before you do another thing. I think that if you don't do that, again, you're kind of shooting in the dark. And it's simple. When you talk about it, it's simple, but we miss that. We miss that when we kind of get in that frenzy of, here's an RFP, what do? We got to put it together. But it's actually pretty a simple concept. You want to work on making sure that you've got the right resources for every proposal. Now, depending on your size, that may not be possible, but you can grow into that. You're welcome to contact us with more. We can help you on answering specific questions on that individually. I think compliance is making sure that you've got somebody that understands a federal RFP, that knows how to dissect it, that knows how to outline it, that knows how to review it, and make sure that it gets turned in 100% compliant. Because you can get thrown out for not being compliant. You can get thrown out for your font not being compliant, and we've seen it happen. In terms of meeting schedule and slipping into ridiculous hours and all those types of things and reviews, you just want a really good project management solution to your proposal that you use all the time, which would include subcontractor inputs and late night final productions. All of that is just really good resource project management. If it's your first proposal, you're not going to have a good plan, but I'll guarantee you by the second one you will. You'll kind of understand a little bit more. And unfortunately, you do have to go through a few of these. You do have to go through some where you figure it out. And again, this is for those of you that's pretty new to it. Hopefully, this training, along with going through it a couple of times, is going to give you that base and that confidence to do this better and win them. And again, if you've been doing it for a while and you're still not quite getting there, these foundational elements here are designed to help you, relook at what may be going on and causing some problems across the board in terms of bidding on this. And we've talked a good bit about the graphics and the one voicing and the proposal errors and consistencies and things like that. So with that, we kind of want to just summarize some things that we talked about, and the hour here goes really quickly, and our desire is to provide a lot of foundational information in a quick time frame so we don't lose attention of everybody, and definitely have some key takeaway points. And I think, if you look at some of these key points, it all starts, if you walk away with anything, it all starts with the evaluator. Keeping in mind the evaluator as a person, and keeping in mind the evaluator has a job to do, and keeping in mind the evaluator is the keeper of the government rules. And that is whether it's federal, state, or local. There are rules that's guiding that acquisition. And they're going to follow those rules. And they're always going to do one thing, and they're going to score your proposal. And they're going to score it in the manner that they tell you they're going to score it. And that's what you want to focus on, getting the highest scores and presenting your information in the way that's most logical for them. That's where you want to grasp the response preparation basics, looking at the instructions, what it is that they want to see, and make sure that you've divided up accordingly all those components of that RFP and that you're not missing a thing. You want a customer-focused solution, and a competitor mitigating solution. Your proposal shouldn't start off talking about how great you are. Your proposal should start off talking about how you understand what that customer needs and telling them in no uncertain terms, this is your issue, this is why you're buying what you're buying, and this is why you should choose us over someone else. And we're going to make your life easier. We're the lowest risk and highest value, but we're going to prove that. We're not just going to say that. And the other takeaway is, so that's solution, that's the RFP. Then you really got to manage it as a project, as we told you. Implement our successful proposal components. There's 5 of them. Chop it up. Make sure that you've got the right hat doing the right thing. And make sure that you know, as you're doing this, what it is you're selling. Sometimes that's easier than other times. It really is. Sometimes it may be very clear-cut what you're offering us. Sometimes maybe not so much, and you're just trying to fill in blanks. But anytime that you're submitting a proposal of any sort, it should compose of an offering that has value, that's tied to your pricing, and that's tied to customer needs. And then, of course, make sure that you're always making sure that it's a top-notch, high-quality marketing document. So this slide here, we're going to kind of lay out for you, and this is the foundational series, and none of these you have to take in order or anything like that, but we've designed these so that they're a plug and play. But basically, you can look at the upcoming sessions and determine which of these you may want. We'll spend a lot more time, so this one is more of a foundational covering the ground. Our next one is actually going to be nothing but compliance. We're going to talk about everything related to compliance in the entire hour. The one after that is going to be about maximizing evaluation scores. We're going to talk in depth about that. In June, we're going to do optimizing your budget. And then one of the final ones is going to be writing to win, because that's going to kind of be something that, you want to attend in terms of, hopefully you've attended a few of these others, and that one should really help make sure that we're not just trying to put words together, but there's a reason and rhyme and reason to it. And then we're going to do one just on proposal production in terms of producing a high-quality marketing document in terms of that. So we're trying to cover the ground for everyone and make sure that, we're not spending 8 and 10 hours at one whack, which no one would want to do, but you're able to come in and look exactly at the things of interest to you. We do have a special offer for anyone attending this webinar, and there's a website. It's called Bid Designs, biddesignspacificnorthwest.com. And as we move into that area, for anyone that is in the Pacific Northwest, we'll do a compliance package and outline template for free. If you go to that website, you can log in. There's no catch to that. It's kind of a thank you for attending, and we can have some good discussions from that. But for an upcoming RFP, we'll do a shred and outline it for you and get you started in the right direction. And finally, if you've got any questions or need a copy of these slides, for instance, or just want to talk about things, please contact Ashley. She is our compliance director and Pacific Northwest sales director. And there's her email address up there. So with that, Kate, we'll turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great information, and looking forward to the other sessions. Definitely lots of information to cover. I would like to remind our attendees that they're welcome to type a question in the question tab on the GoToWebinar dashboard. You might need to click a red arrow or a double arrow symbol to get that back on your screen, but we definitely invite your questions. Sandy, Brett, I do have a few questions here from the audience. When should a company seek help with their proposals? If you can give us some insight on that.
Sure. So I don't know if the question is responding to, in general at the corporate level, or, when an RFP drops. So I'll kind of answer it from both angles. One is you should definitely have an established strategy at the corporate level of how you're going to respond to RFPs. The other element of that is when you have a live RFP, if you know that you are planning to submit a response to that RFP, at that point you should engage whatever help you're going to engage for that particular effort. Don't wait until it drops. You don't even have to wait until there's a draft out. If you have interest in bidding in something, and you can even engage your proposal team during the RFI or the sources sought or the industry day stage. We definitely like to get involved as early as possible for any RFPs that are coming out. We have some clients that track particular efforts for years and set up different elements of reviews that they do up through the draft and the final RFP. And then, of course, we have other clients that come to us after an RFP has dropped. You definitely don't want to be asking for help less than, 2 or 3 days before it's due. It really plays into our recommendation that everything be really processed and scheduled so that you can ensure that you've got that quality and compliance that you have to represent your customer. I hope that was a decent answer. If not, feel free to email Ashley, and she knows how to get to me, and we can have an additional discussion.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, I imagine many of the questions are very specific for our attendees here today. Here, another audience question. Can you outline on a high level what services Bid Design provides?
Sure. So what Bid Designs provides is we provide proposal infrastructure support. So that is compliance and analysis of an RFP. We provide recommended outlines for a full proposal response. We have a desktop publishing team that does compliance-based editing, formatting, and graphic design. And we also do proposal publication. In addition to that, you're paired with a client engagement manager who helps with your scheduling, helps with configuration control to make sure that you're working on the right documents at the right time, and just generally being in your court to make sure that your proposal is going the way that you want it to.
Great, thank you. Very valuable. Well, looks like I'm going to do a last call for questions here if any of our audience would like to ask a question specifically, or we do have Ashley Coronado's contact information up on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to her with specific questions, definitely. And as a reminder, I know Brett and Sandy reviewed the upcoming presentations. Those will all be promoted in the PNDC newsletter, so look for specific dates and registration information on each one of those webinars coming up. We definitely love to have you join us. And thank you, Brett and Sandy. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise. This has been really valuable, and we are so glad to have you as part of the PNDC community. For all our attendees, I will remind you that there will be a brief 3-question, real brief survey at the end of this event, and we'd really love your feedback. It'll just pop up on your screen when we're done with the webinar. So with that, thank you, Brett and Sandy. The webinar has now ended.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.